Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in again for one more episode of our in-depth videos that we do on amazic.com. I'm Twain Taylor, editor at Amazic. And at amazic.com, we do a lot of stuff like this where we talk to experts and influencers from the cloud native and Kubernetes space. And we do articles, we do event coverage, we have job listings. So there's a whole lot happening. So please go and check out all of that at amazic.com. And today we have with us from Orca Security, Andrew Bartlam. He's the Vice President, Sales EMEA at Orca. Andrew, it's a pleasure to have you today. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. So, wanted to just start off with, getting just an elevator pitch from you about, what Orca does and, just how it fits into the whole security space, because the security space is pretty crowded right now. There's a lot of solutions. There's tools that do different kinds of things with security. Considering this, how does Orca fit into the whole security tool chain and what's its positioning?
Yeah, that's a really good place to start. So thanks for bringing that up. So think of it like this: Orca actually provides 9 different solutions in one.
Okay.
But first of all, Orca is a holistic and agentless cloud security solution for all of the major public cloud platforms. So AWS, Google, Microsoft Azure, and shortly Oracle and Ali Cloud as well. And what Orca does is it provides comprehensive and complete visibility. So what that actually means is that Orca, as I mentioned earlier, combines together 9 different types of products in one. So you've got, see if I can remember this, cloud security posture management, cloud workload protection, container security, so we can replace a lot of solutions, legacy solutions there, vulnerability scanning, same thing, compliance reporting, sensitive data discovery, I'm testing my knowledge here, cloud asset discovery, file integrity monitoring, and anti-malware. And what this all means is that organizations can significantly reduce and rationalize their security spend, the spend that they've been spending on multiple different point products, and at the same time massively reduce the enormous burden, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, of things like alert fatigue from multiple different point products that are all pinging off alerts and alarms every 5 minutes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great elevator pitch, and kudos to you for listing the whole list of the 9 products that you have.
Lucky I remembered it.
That's awesome. So there's so much that I found interesting about Orca, and I wanted to kind of dive into each of those. The first thing that I was wanting you to flesh out for us is something that I think is most important to what Orca does, which is context. So I saw this term context-aware security on your website and the pages, product pages, and all of that.
Yeah.
Could you just break this down for us? What's context? Why is it important?
Yeah, in the MarTech world, they say content is king. I think in the cloud security world, context is king. Let me explain. So Orca provides the contextual analysis for better prioritization and discovery of risks that aren't possible with other tools. And that's because Orca Security understands the map. In other words, how all of the assets are connected to each other and to all of the different attack vectors that a black hat might take. And so what that means is that really helps organizations to replace lists with thousands of alerts and prioritize to the top few that matter, the top 5 or 10 that are absolutely critical to an organization's business. So let me give you an example to make it come alive a bit, if I may. It's a really simplistic example, but I think you'll get it really quickly. So imagine 2 workloads, right? Server 1 and server 2. Both running a web server that uses a library which is, let's say, vulnerable to remote execution code risk. And in this case, for the sake of this example, let's assume the vulnerability is exactly the same in both cases. Now, a context-less vulnerability scanner such as an agent-based solution, will simply go and report this vulnerability with its static CVS score, its security score, and both workloads will end up getting exactly the same risk score. They're internet facing, there's a challenge, problem. But Orca, on the other hand, says, well, hang on a second, we can deduce from the cloud configuration that the service on server 1 is internet facing and therefore the risk level is imminent compromise. And server 2 perhaps isn't internet facing and can't be reached directly from anywhere but a particular host. And therefore the risk is only hazardous. Or alternatively, server 1 and server 2 might both be internet facing, but server 1 is connected to your database of pencils or cleaning products or whatever else. Server 2 is connected to something which is then load balanced to something which is connected to something that, oh my goodness, is connected to a PII database, right? And that is context for you. Identifying that, look, pencils aren't actually as important as this other thing that's connected to a PII database. That's your number one problem to fix right now that's critical to your business. And that is cloud security context. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think totally makes sense. And I think what this does is it drastically reduces your triaging and troubleshooting and just your root cause analysis. What have you seen? Can you give us some examples of, the kind of difference you've seen for customers before they use Orca versus after?
It's incredible, because an unnamed CISO and I had a discussion 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he said, I think we have a pretty good view on everything. Security is really important to us. We run a pretty tight ship. But nevertheless, he agreed to do a POC. We spun up this POC. It gets live in minutes because it's agentless, of course. And suddenly he was able to see things that he didn't know were there. And the point is, you can be the most secure organization on the planet. You can be the most compliant organization on the planet on the things that you have. When we point out that 5-year-old Windows XP machine that's connected into the cloud network that has 1, 2, 3, 4 as a password or hasn't been updated or reconfigured in the last 5 years or something ridiculous like that, that is an imminent threat for a black hat to go through, that's really important. So this opens eyes for organizations who may have done a brilliant job of deploying agents on what they knew they had, but it's the stuff you don't know that you have that's going to come and, excuse my French, but bite you in the backside at some point. So identifying that risk is critical for organizations. And we almost always will find something that an organization didn't know they had. And it's not like the cloud slows down, right? You can spin up 1,000 virtual machines with a credit card in minutes, right? So the stuff that you don't know, the unknowns, to use a Donald Rumsfeld quote, that's the kind of thing that you need to be aware of.
Yeah, interesting. Wanted to tee off on that, talking about just dynamic systems, because the cloud is becoming even more dynamic. The surface area keeps increasing.
Yeah.
And as you were even mentioning, the unknown unknowns. So what's Orca's approach to keeping track of the whole, the footprint of the system as it expands, as it changes? How does Orca spot new instances that are spun up automatically, even often these days, without even agents? How does Orca handle this?
Yeah, so we see everything instantly as soon as we're employed. We don't require an agent-based capability. And by the way, agents, it's maybe unfair of me to refer to agent-based players as legacy, because it's really only 5 or 6 years old. But nevertheless, side scanning, which Orca has brought to market, which is the ability to look at everything and see the entire cloud real estate very, very quickly without agents, does allow us, I think, with some confidence and some validity, to refer to agent-based solutions as legacy. You see, agent-based solutions can do a reasonable job once you, as I mentioned earlier, deploy all of those agents to every single instance in the cloud. But here's the rub. As I mentioned earlier, and we saw this, by the way, with over 50% of our original customer engagements showed us that your average organization lacks security visibility into at least 50%. And that's a bold statement, but it's true, because that's what we've seen of its cloud infrastructure footprint, right? And that's huge. And that's mostly due to an organization's inability to keep up with the incredibly high total cost of ownership for agent deployment and maintenance. So by definition, I guess is my point, with an agent-based solution, you can always be compliant on securing what you know you have, but you're always on the back foot. Whereas with Orca, once you set it up, the solution immediately has full visibility across your entire cloud real estate, and it can then provide you with that full context-based security and compliance capability out of the box. So clients, for example, can demonstrate evidence of their ability to find and protect sensitive data like PII, for example. You see, Orca uniquely recognizes where that sensitive data is stored across your cloud real estate, and then it alerts you to any potential exploitation path. So you can meet key data privacy mandates like PCI, DSS, HIPAA, GDPR, CCPA, etc. But at the same time, Orca will never break any of those data privacy laws, because only a masked subset of data is shown for triage purposes. And at a macro level, the way we do that is we look at the cloud workload plus the cloud metadata, we put it together, and that's how we can, that's our secret sauce, if you like.
Okay. Yeah. If you could just tell us a little bit more about that. It sounds very interesting, this idea of the thing you mentioned about side scanning. If you could just tell us a bit more without getting too much into detail about just how this works, and
Yeah, sure.
It sounds interesting.
Yeah. So happy to. So side scanning is patent pending, by the way, from Orca Security. It's agile, it's easy, it's super fast, it's easy to deploy, and it scales. So side scanning is agentless. It's done at the cloud account level, not at the per asset level. So there's no per asset integration. So there's no missed assets. So again, relying on agents for security visibility in the cloud is fundamentally flawed. And what's more, by the way, those assets have to be capable of having an agent installed on them in the first place and then maintained. And those assets have to have ongoing network connectivity to the backend. But in this incredibly fast-paced world, which you guys know about, of DevOps, developers don't want to be bothered with deploying agents on virtual machines, in containers and in serverless configurations, let alone, by the way, dealing with their never-ending maintenance, right? And that's why Orca developed the patent-pending side scanning technology that covers millions of virtual machines out there in the world today, and compute instances out there in the public cloud. So that's side scanning.
Awesome. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And this obviously works, as well for single cloud as it does for multi-cloud, right? Or is there more complexity when it comes to multi-cloud? What changes from, single cloud to multi-cloud?
Yeah. So as I said before, Orca covers all of the major public clouds, including AWS, Google, Azure, and coming Oracle and Ali Cloud. So instead of having up to 5 native security tools, plus a plethora of other solutions across malware and vulnerability scanning and CSPM and CWPP and compliance and asset discovery and everything else, you can have one solution that's specifically designed to provide total security and compliance across all of those public clouds. I think here's the real rub. Too many organizations were forced to adopt security solutions from their existing vendors that were twisted from the legacy on-premise environments to try and fit the cloud. And everyone wanted to suddenly have a cloud solution, but it wasn't really architected natively in the cloud. It was twisted on-premise stuff. And so far too often, they've fallen short in functionality and also required costly agents to be deployed. And if you think about one of the biggest challenges for security organizations today, it is this continually evolving friction between the security team and the DevOps group, because security is there to help run the business and keep the business safe. But if you have to have some legacy agent-based technology, you've got to go cap in hand to DevOps and say, look, please, could you install these agents on our X thousand or 100,000 instances out there in the cloud? And then DevOps goes, okay, you know what, we can do it, but maybe we can't start for another 2 weeks. And there has to be an internal cross charge and a scope of work or an SOW or something. And then DevOps turns up and they install the agents on everything. But guess what? As soon as they leave, it's not like the business is saying, could everyone please stop growing the business and stop using cloud, right? Cloud continues to evolve. The elasticity of cloud is one of the beautiful things about it. And so suddenly the day DevOps have gone, you're finding, or we are finding, and our clients are finding, virtual machines and containers and other instances out there that aren't covered by these agents. So you've got to bring DevOps back in for a while. And in that interim time period, stuff is left alone and potentially at risk from a security perspective. But also you've got this friction, as I mentioned earlier, between security and DevOps. And that's something I'm really pleased to say we thought a lot about when we architected this. And that is why we're able to remove that in a very big way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I wanted to just talk a little bit more about what you started with just now, talking about how, security has been sort of retrofitted, lift and shift from on-premise to cloud, and it just doesn't work. If you could just give us a few examples that could really strike a chord with our viewers and probably make them, go like, yeah, I know that, I've experienced that. Could you give us an example of that?
Yeah. Do you mean in terms of specific vendors, or do you just mean in terms of
no, without naming any vendor specifically, just talking about how security is sort of just lifted and shifted without really thinking about cloud
of course.
first.
So if you talk about things like vulnerability management, they've lifted and shifted. There's so many vendors there that came from an on-premise world. There's the kind of the big three in that area, without naming any names, and they've all pertain to have some kind of cloud capability, but it's all agent based. And they do a good job, right? But the problem is you're requiring DevOps to come in. You're requiring the installation of agents. You're running the risk of a lack of coverage when there isn't an agent-based capability there. And it's the same for malware and file asset discovery and compliance and numerous other areas of security. And this all contributes to organizations saying we want to go into cloud. And we're migrating a lot of stuff to cloud, and then their legacy on-premise vendors will sell them whatever their cloud capability is. But suddenly you've got multiple different point products, and this is what contributes to this horrible concept that we're all aware of now. And it has to be very real because it has its own term, right, called alert fatigue, which is where all of these different tools are popping off and chiming and ringing and these alarms are going off all over the place. And if you're a CISO, you're kind of looking around and you just don't know where to start, which again leads to the whole context issue of, I have 10,000 alerts. I know that. Tell me the top 5 or 10 that are critical to my business right now and that I really need to take action on.
Yeah, I want to just dig a little bit more into that. So could you tell us in a little bit more specifics, just how Orca handles alert fatigue? What are some of the ways that Orca customers, get relief from this problem?
Yeah, I think a lot of organizations, when it comes to alert fatigue, this is not new news, right? They know they have far too much there, and human nature dictates that if you've got 10,000 alerts, you'll probably look at the top 5 because they're top of the pile, right? Not because they're the important ones to do. And so, not knowing what to do, a lot of organizations thought that the solution was to get a SIM tool and just put everything in there. But then, I had a CTO joke with me the other day that this is he said, yeah, we've got a great SIM tool and it does a really good job for us. But we simply have, thousands of alerts in one interface now rather than across multiple different products. But this is where context is key, right? Having 10,000 alerts doesn't help your CISO or your security team. Not knowing where to start is a critical problem in and of itself. And so Orca brings that context to the picture. Tell me those things that are critical to my business right now. Tell me quickly and efficiently what I need to do to fix them right now as well. Don't just tell me that I have a problem. Tell me what to do to fix it. So while Orca doesn't do the remediation itself, because we are, as I mentioned earlier, non-intrusive, we will actually point out, here is the challenge and here is the solution. Fix that. I joked earlier about a password of 1234 or something ridiculous, right? Fix the weak password, or install the latest updates, for example, or configure this machine appropriately, or remove these keys that everyone can see and access, something like that. So Orca will not just say, here are all the challenges. We will say, here are the critical challenges to your business right now, and we'll tell you why. And we'll also tell you, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, what the specific things you need to do are in order to fix that problem right away.
Got it. That's interesting. And I want to ask, I don't know if Orca does this, but does Orca do more than security? Let's say, stuff like optimizing performance, saving on costs, stuff like that? Does Orca do any of that, or
You
is
know,
it
it's
very focused on security monitoring?
it's interesting. Security and compliance are Orca's bread and butter, and it's what we were architected specifically to do for the cloud. You know, we don't have the hangover of on-premise, which is why we've been able to be so innovative and fast-growing in what we do. But we did have a client say to us the other day, "You guys are really good at being able to show us what we have out there on the network." And that can really help us from an asset discovery perspective. That can really help us to work out how we licensed appropriately. So we're not a license checker, but by telling them what they had, a very, very large organization with hundreds of thousands of assets out there in the cloud, we're able to help them to identify how to appropriately license the different packages that they have. So that's something we're able to help clients with as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, we're winding down. Just want to touch on lastly, just decluttering the security toolkit. What are some ways you've seen that, customers sort of shed tools once they start using Orca? Could you give us some examples of the kind of things that customers don't need to do once they have Orca?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I think we agreed earlier, there are so many point products, many of which have been twisted from the old on-prem days into cloud, but others which have been bought as point products in the cloud, such as container scanning tools, for example, or malware tools for the cloud, or asset discovery tools or whatever. So we find a lot of organizations will buy Orca because they have either a multi-cloud environment or they want to replace multiple point products, or both. And we often find that over time, not immediately perhaps, especially because not all of their contracts will have run down, but we find a lot of time organizations are able to rationalize their solution spend and actually not renew with their container point product security product or their vulnerability scanning product. So it's not just about taking cost out of the business by removing that friction and being more agile. It's not just about being more secure because you're able to see everything instantly. It's also about the business case of being able to rationalize solution spend by reducing spend across those 9 different areas that Orca covers. As I mentioned earlier, container security, vulnerability, scanning, anti-malware, file integrity monitoring, asset discovery, compliance, and many others.
All right. Awesome. So for our viewers who are thinking, this sounds interesting, I want to check this out. What's the best way to get started? And, any concluding remarks that you'd want to say, if there's one takeaway from this episode, what would that be?
Yeah, absolutely. I think seeing is believing, right? And I think we have to put our money where our mouth is, because this in many ways sounds too good to be true, right? I can really get up and running immediately and rationalize spend and remove friction. What's the catch, right? The technology is first class. Obviously, you would expect me to say that, but I think putting our money where our mouth is, clients can come to our website and they can get hold of our solution for free. Full functionality. There's no limitations whatsoever in functionality, and they can run a free cloud risk assessment for a minimum of 30 days and more if they like. And like I said, it's the full solution, no limitations on functionality, super quick install. And what it will do is provide them with full visibility into the compliance and security threats that they currently may not be seeing. So if you're a client and you like what you see, come along to orca.security, take the free risk assessment. You'll get the free full product with no limitations whatsoever. You don't even need to speak to a salesperson. You can just get it.
How long does this take, the whole assessment? Approximately?
You can get up and running literally in minutes, allow a few hours, of course. Orca says that we will come back to you within a month and give you the full presentation on what we have seen, if you would like to have it, or you can do your own and you can get that within 24 hours. Absolutely no problem. But why not let us do the work for you and put a few slides together and show you what we found in your environment. And again, we don't see anything. This is completely non-intrusive. We're just able to see to show you what threats we found.
Okay, so on day one itself, you have it all.
Indeed.
All right, that's awesome. Wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing all of that, Andrew. That was really interesting. Really, really want to learn more about Orca and how Orca does agentless security monitoring. Really interesting concept. Side scanning, context. A lot of interesting things that Orca is working on. So thanks for sharing all of that. As we end, before we end, we got a last segment, which is a kind of get to know you segment, my favorite, some fun questions. So we got about 5 questions for you. So the first one is, what's the best way that you learn new ideas? And so, yeah, things like, do you read books? Do you watch videos? Do you listen to an audio? You write stuff? What's your favorite way of learning?
That's a really good question. I think I would say that the thing where I really learn is from other people.
Okay.
And I think here's what I would say. I think by never being afraid to ask the dumb question in the room, because I tell you what, experience has told me, and by the way, I'm always the one asking the dumb question in the room. But experience has really told me that a lot of the time, a lot of people don't want to ask that dumb question. But here's the interesting thing.
To be the best.
But they're really interested in the answer, right? So I'm happy to embarrass myself and ask the dumb question. I think learning from people is the best.
Wow. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, really interesting answer. The second one for you, what did you want to be when you were a kid?
Oh, that's easy. I wanted to be a fighter pilot, just like my dad.
Okay.
I wasn't smart enough.
All right. Oh, cool. Yeah. The one thing that's part of your morning routine.
Well, I live on an island in the River Thames near London, so it's really nice to walk along the river first thing in the morning. If I have time, I try and walk my dogs early in the morning along the river. It's really beautiful.
Wow, that's wonderful. The last book that you read.
The last book I read was called Alone in Berlin by Hans Verlader. I think I pronounced it right, Hans Verlader. It's a story of immense and unseen great courage in a society with a completely wrecked moral compass. Wartime story. They just made a movie out of it. Actually, I haven't seen it, but it's with Emma Thompson and Brendan Gleeson, the Irish guy. I'd really like to see it, but it's set in Berlin at the end of the Second World War.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Got to check that out. So that's Alone in Berlin, right?
Yep. By Hans Verlader.
All right. Cool. Last question for you. Your favorite YouTube channel?
Well, it depends what you mean. For work, it's TechCrunch. TechCrunch is great. It just gives you great insight into the tech world, and not just on cyber, of course, but on interesting startups, on innovations and really interesting people. And for personal, it's Expedia, of course, right? Who doesn't like booking travel, right? So yeah.
All right. Interesting. Neat. So lastly, where can viewers find you online?
Yeah, sure. My company, Orca Security, really simple. Come join us. We'd love to see you. And then me personally, LinkedIn. I live in LinkedIn, so come find me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Great. With that, I want to thank all of our viewers for watching, and we hope you really enjoyed this conversation and learned a lot about security and Orca's take on security. So yeah, definitely check out Orca and all that they do. Also want to remind you to head over to amazic.com, the website where we host this video and many more like this. We have news articles and a whole lot more. We also want to give you a reminder that we're covering the event KubeCon, Cloud Native Con Europe, which is happening next month. So yeah, just if you want to catch up on what's happening with the event, just head over there. So with that, we come to the close of this episode. And thank you all for tuning in. And thank you again, Andrew, for sharing so much generously from all of your insight and experience. We really had a great time talking to you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Twain. Bye-bye.
Bye.